Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Work Comp Updates, presented by our sponsor, Heffernan. We're so happy you can join us. My name is Deb Beto, and I will be your moderator today and be monitoring questions you may have during the session. Before we open up the session, let's review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discuss can be found at the URL currently showing on your screen. I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. If you have audio difficulties or a telephone line goes dead during the call, hang up and call back again to the same number. If all lines go dead, watch the on-screen chat box for an alternative call-in number. Please feel free to ask questions or provide feedback by using the chat box or questions box during the webinar. If you are using a tablet, you may need to tap on the screen for the options bar to appear, and then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately, but we will try to work your questions or feedback into the presentation. If we can't get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond, or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrmg.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Questions and comments are very much encouraged throughout, and the presenter will be answering questions at the end. And lastly, we have a number of webinars upcoming covering a variety of topics, including those listed at the Heffernan webinar website. In addition, we offer the mandatory Preventing Harassment training in English 3 times a year. With that, let's begin today's webinar, Work Comp Updates. Today's interactive session will be facilitated by Deborah Parker. Deborah Parker is from Aspen Risk Management Group. Deborah's professional career began in the late 70s and has spanned both the carrier and brokerage sides of the business as a workers' compensation specialist. She has held increasing levels of responsibility in underwriting, marketing, branch management, and in-home office operations leadership roles. With that, let's begin today's presentation. Thank you, Deborah.
Well, thanks, Deb, and welcome everybody. And happy St. Patty's Day. Today is March 17th, 2020. So we're going to go through work comp updates and kind of look at what happened last year, what's on the horizon for this year. Little disclaimer, we're not constituting a consulting arrangement here or advice. We're not a client relationship here, so we have to go through that little disclaimer there. So our agenda today is we want to go through the financial status of the work comp industry. We're going to talk about OSHA and Cal OSHA updates. I believe many of you are from California, so you would follow to the Cal OSHA. We can't leave out COVID-19, like you don't hear enough about it, but I'm going to stick to just how it pertains to workers' comp today. So I won't inundate you with all the things you've already seen. The future of things, kind of what to do looking forward. And what I left off of here that we're going to talk a little bit about is also once an incident does occur in your business, you know, how to handle that to the best result. Before we get started, though, we'd like to learn a little bit more about you with some polling questions. So I know Deb is going to put this up on the screen for you, but we'd like to know if you've attended a previous Heffernan webinar. So the answer is yes, you have, or no, you haven't.
So the poll is up on your screen, and we're going to do only a few polls today, but we do want to make sure that you're paying attention. So please, I'm not going to share any polling results until we've got about 80% of the people responding. So please participate today and have a great time with this. So Deborah, we have 76% say yes, 19% say no, and the rest are not sure.
Okay, well, welcome to the new people. And Appreciate you participating. We've got one more for now, another polling question. We'd like to know what type of business you're in. I know you're from various different organizations.
Yes, and this polling feature only allows us to put 5 options in. So we've had to group some of the options together, and then of course other is going to be the big catch-all. So we apologize that we're not able to list more than 5, but at least we'll get a good idea of who we've got in the webinar with us. So we've got about 64% voting. Again, we want to make sure that people are participating today. So I'm going to wait just one more moment while we make sure everybody votes. If you don't know where you stand on these top 4, then you might want to put other. So Deborah, we have 4% in hospitality, 12% in agriculture or construction, 7% in wholesale, retail, or manufacturing, a whopping 33% in nonprofit or government, and then 48% say other.
Wow, okay. Well, we've got at least somebody in every category there, so that's great. So the trends and updates we're going to go through today include the current state of the work comp system, the OSHA Cal-OSHA update, and future trending. One of the things that contributes to what you pay in your workers' comp premium is payroll. And if we look at the industry from 2017 to 2018, the wage rates have gone up 3%. Payroll itself has gone up 5.3%. And employment, you're hiring new employees, 1.9%. And those of you that listed that you were in construction, you're leading the group. So good information there. So the premiums paid for workers' comp as compared to, and this is just private carriers, by the way, and this is nationwide. It's a big chunk of premium out of personal auto being, of course, the leading, almost a third of the entire industry. But workers' comp has increased 8.5% from 2017 to 2018. It is now $43.2 billion of premium. So when we look at that, we mentioned payroll. Payroll is a big factor here. Going from 2014 versus 2017, we've got 13.8% increased due to payroll. Decreases is a positive thing. Loss cost and mix of losses as well as carrier discounting. So you're getting decreases due to better performance in the work comp industry. So this is all very positive stuff here. And another positive is the P&C industry net combined ratio. We had talked about this if any of you have been on my past webinars. It's kind of like your checkbook. So the net combined ratio for an insurance company, anything under 100 is positive. So if you've got your paycheck coming in, you've got to pay your utility bills, your rent, etc. Whatever's left over at the end, hopefully is not more than 100, right? You haven't spent more than 100% of what came in. So this again is a very nice positive. Workers' comp is very, it looks to be the most profitable of other insurance lines, and for the first time in a while, the total P&C industry is doing well under 99. They can operate at over 100 due to investment income. Obviously, they can invest based on reserves, so things that haven't been paid out yet, they earn interest on. From an impact here, wildfires in California burned over 900,000 acres, resulting in over $15 billion in losses. So we've got some catastrophic type events that have led to some increases. Same thing with major hurricanes in the southeast. Actually, the wildfires in California for the prior year were $11 billion. So that's increased another $4 billion over the prior year. So like I said, we can't leave out COVID-19. And I'm going to, like I said, keep this to as respects workers' comp. So the first question is it compensable? Do we have to pay for people calling this work-related? Because work comp laws do provide compensation for occupational diseases that arise out of in the course of employment. And that's key, arising out of and in the course of employment, because many state statutes exclude ordinary diseases of life, which would include the common cold or a flu. So if you think about healthcare workers, you might say, well, you know, that is an occupational hazard, but we don't know whether those people contracted it at the grocery store or the gym or wherever else they might have been. So it's hard to track whether it's truly work-related. But NCCI, which is the National Compensation on or National Council on Compensation and Insurance, which is a nationwide data resource, says the question may be answered as maybe. So that's a little concerning. And one state, Washington, who has the most incidents of coronavirus at this time on March 5th, did say that they were extending it to coverage for healthcare workers and first responders. Now, I should clarify this, that Washington state happens to be a very unique state. It's considered a monopolistic state, so it's kind of state-run. And they're stating that it remains to be seen if other states will take the same measures relative to work comp. In recent developments with President Trump stating that he was extending coverage through the healthcare system with no copays to treat and diagnose coronavirus, as well as relaxing unemployment laws if, you know, somebody has to be out and they're out of sick time, it probably will put less pressure on the work comp system as a result. So I don't think we're going to see that impact. I'm going to go out on a limb. It's a personal observation. So what does OSHA say about it? OSHA does have a website dedicated to it, and I've provided that link for you in here. It's not a standard or a regulation, however. So just like the bloodborne pathogen programs in the healthcare system, there is no standard per se on this, but there is a general duty clause. And the general duty clause says employers must provide their employees with a workplace free from recognized hazards likely to cause death or serious physical harm. They rely on that general duty clause a lot. So, you know, keep that in mind. I think the best thing that you can do, the CDC does expect that the widespread transmission will occur and that most of us will be exposed. And as you've seen, you know, exposed is different than death, you know, or serious illness. So keep that in mind. Stick to the CDC and the WHO sites, the OSHA guidelines that I've given you here. You know, we've talked a long time, years and years ago, about having pandemic programs in place as part of your risk assessment in running a business. So many of you in nonprofits may have already had that in place. This is a good test to see, you know, how we respond. So just keep to the facts, keep to the CDC, the WHO, and I think we'll be good with that. So another polling question as we jump into actual injuries that occur in the work comp area, if you want to run up, what do you think the most frequent type of injury is?
This is where it starts to get interesting. COVID-19 is definitely throwing a wrench into things, but it's not the most prevalent injury in the workplace for sure.
I didn't put that on the list, as you noticed.
Okay, so we've got a good percentage of the people voting. We'll wait for just one more second here. And somebody had asked me in relating to the percentages, it helps to know how many people are attending, and we've actually increased our attendance from 85 to, we now have 94 attendees this morning. So when you're thinking about the percentages, it's almost 1 for 1 here. All right, so we have 22% say upper extremities, 8% say lower extremities, 67% say back and neck, 0% say other, and 3% are not sure.
Okay, well, you all voted the way I would have. We always think about back injuries quite a bit when we think about workers' comp because they're quite debilitating for one. They're long-term usually, and they're also expensive. But we were wrong. Hartford did a study and found that 40% of the most common injuries are upper extremities, followed by feet, legs, and pelvis, and 20% are neck and back. So that was a surprising result when we looked at that study. As far as causes of loss, what caused these injuries, Liberty Mutual does a workplace safety index every year. These were the top 10 in 2018 of causes and direct cost of the most disabling workers' comp injuries. Overexertion involving outside sources was topping the list, and that also included things like pushing, pulling, lifting. It could also include cumulative type injuries, which definition of that would be something that happens over time versus you cut your finger and you see that you're injured. That's an acute injury. Cumulative would be something that occurs over time. And that was followed by falls, both on the same level, falls to lower level, and then struck by object or equipment and on down the line there. Going to the next year, 2019, it was interesting that struck by object or equipment actually moved up the list from 5% to 9%. So I don't know what we're doing differently, perhaps with maybe more equipment, but that was an interesting. Other than that, things pretty much stayed about the same. So those were disabling injuries. And then interesting too on this, I'll back up a bit, is roadway incidents involving motorized vehicles is almost 5% of the cause. Those can be disastrous, however. So if you look at transportation incidents as far as fatal incidents, that represents 37%, followed by falls, slips, and trips. Then we get into cost, okay? Costs of these injuries that cost your business and cost, the work comp industry as a whole. Median for indemnity claims. Now, indemnity claims are those that you've actually had lost wage replacement for lost time injuries. Median nationwide was 19,000, California 26,000. The leading cost was New York at 50,000, and this is just for the lost time wage portion of the claim. Then you add in the medical portion of the claim. Again, median about the same at 26,000. California is above the median again at 37,000, with Delaware leading the medical cost at 53,000. So if you look at the total average cost of a lost time incident, if you combine the medical and the lost wages, in California, you're looking at $63,000 on average. Pretty expensive for one claim. Then we look at the claims per 1,000 of employees by state. And California again up there, Oregon quite high. And if we looked at California, let's just say out of 100 employees, let me go there for a second here. Yeah, 1.5 employees will have an indemnity lost time accident if this indemnity claims per 1,000 works out. So your lost time cost would be 94,000. And that's just the direct cost of the claim. There are also indirect costs of a claim. When an injury occurs in your workplace, you're also trying to replace that person because they're out of work. Maybe you have to hire a temp. Maybe you have to have other employees step in. There's these indirect costs of the injury, which if this injury cost calculator is used, let's just say that 63,000 direct cost of injury at the top there, your indirect cost of an injury is 4 times that. So 252,000 is the indirect cost. So your total true cost of that injury is 315,000. If you have a profit margin of 10%, some of you in nonprofit organizations, this may not work out, but the revenue required to offset that loss would be over $3 million. So this is pretty drastic. A lot of incentive to reduce injuries and prevent injuries. We're going to get into that a little bit. I did want to share with you some new things that have come through, and I've given you the link here if you want to go look at this on your own. Cal OSHA does publish updates on things that are in the forefront. You saw the statistics on the wildfires in California and the cost. There's also concern that employees working outside, maybe in ag or construction around those fires, also are exposed to poor air quality as a result. So they've put together a wildfire response and air quality statement. There's also, Cal OSHA has given some safety guidance on coronavirus. And from what I've looked at, it's no different than what the CDC is advising us all: wash your hands, et cetera, et cetera. Safety and health and agricultural field operations, sample hazard communication program, and that's having to do with chemicals and training your employees on the new global harmonization system. And that is available in Word format now, so that makes it easy for you to adopt in your business. Same thing with the IIPP specifically for restaurants, also available in Word format. And this is an interesting one that's been there actually, but they have put it together with a standard 5199 aerosol transmissible diseases model exposure control plan. And that typically was for healthcare workers, and it applied mostly to things like TB. But now obviously it's appropriate with the COVID-19 situation. So there is an actual exposure control plan, very similar to the bloodborne pathogen plan that you'll see in there. So that was California. And then we have FedOSHA. Those of you not in California usually fall under the FedOSHA. They've got a temporary enforcement guidance for respiratory fit testing in healthcare during the COVID-19 outbreak. Healthcare workers are now obviously wearing the N95 respirators, and they put out a bulletin on the fit testing involved for those respirators. U.S. Department of Labor guidance for preparing workplaces for coronavirus. The Dollar Tree stores, this was a multitude, it was almost like a big crackdown, it looked like, of citations for exposing employees to exit storage and fire hazards. There's blocked exits, various stores in different states, so that's an interesting one to look at. And a reminder for everybody, we're overdue if you haven't already filed your electronic filing for 2019, the OSHA 300A, which is the summary report only. You don't have to file your logs, but your summary report was due March 2nd for the 2019. And I'm just going to go over this again. The deadline for electronically reporting. Who has to do it? Anybody with 250 or more employees that are currently required to keep OSHA injury illness records, and establishments with 20 to 249 employees that are classified in certain industries. And these are the higher hazard industries. And there's a list of those that you can see if you click on that link later, if you'd like to look at what those are, if you're not sure if you fall into that or not. So the industries that must file with 20 or more employees, here's the guide for how to submit that. And they removed the requirement last year of filing the 300 and 301 reports. The 300 is the actual log that you keep, and the 301 is the individual. If you choose to use that, it's the individual report. So you're only filing your summary report. So if you haven't done that yet, that's something to look into. Make sure that you've done that. They did talk last year about actually cracking down, and I've seen actual citations for not submitting those. So you want to look at that. So what can you do to prevent these injuries? We've seen how expensive they are to your business, obviously with the direct and indirect costs, quite expensive for your company. Conduct regular self-inspection safety audits to identify and eliminate hazardous conditions. That is something that I find a lot of employers are not doing. in California, it is part of the IIPP requirement that you do that. It could be something very simple, like a checklist. You know, take a look around your organization, get feedback from people on the front line of your organization. You know, what do they see as hazardous? You know, look at near misses, even though you haven't had a work comp injury reported. Maybe somebody said, oh gosh, I just tripped over such and such and I almost fell. That would be something to look into. Good housekeeping is obvious, keeping your floor clear of any materials that could cause a worker to slip or trip. We saw that that was one of the major causes of injury, was slip, trip, and fall. Providing your employees with adequate personal protective equipment and enforce its use. That's probably the major thing. Is I've walked through organizations on doing safety audits and find respirators or hearing protection kind of hanging up there collecting dust. So people are not using it. And the supervisor that's walking me through the plant is walking through without his safety goggles, even though there's a safety glass requirement walking through the plant. That sends a message if your supervisors are not wearing the PPE and you're not enforcing it. Properly train all employees and train often. Newer employees are the most vulnerable to an accident. As you hire new employees, it's even more prudent to make sure that they get the task training on their specific safety aspects of their job. So not just, you know, have them sign off on the fact that they read the IIPP, they read the Code of Safe Practices. The supervisor level is very integral in doing that training and making sure they do more in-depth training. Once they get out of your HR process and go through the basic safety training, it's important that they sit with them and go through their individual tasks. They're new to the organization. They're new perhaps to the task that they're going to be performing. And seasoned employees can always use a refresher course. I like this one because I even had an employer the other day, just within the last few weeks, say, yeah, I know the guys have been here a while and I think they sometimes get complacent. And that's very possible. You get very used to your environment. You don't even see things anymore sometimes. So yeah, it's, you know, get their attention, even though they've been doing it forever and you think they're safe. And you can't do any harm in recycle, rinse, and repeat this stuff. So what is in the future? And again, if I look at everything from last year to this year, it's very much the same. It's very technology driven. We're speeding delivery of proof of coverage, payments to injured workers as a result. There's apps out there now. Injured workers can, you know, find out where they are in the process of their claim, which helps you as an employer. It doesn't take away the responsibility of communication. We're going to get into that a little bit. But how cool is that you can actually get rest assured that, you know, your check is on the way. You can ask Alexa, where's my check? When is my doctor's appointment? Data formatting. You've got blockchain risk block. If you think of lost data that's not standardized now, I know I worked in an insurance carrier myself in underwriting, and we had to look at different lost data that was coming from the prior history of the account, and it's in all different formats, and it's in PDF format. It would be so cool if we can get that standardized and able to quickly evaluate. Pharmacists are matching DNA to prescriptions. I haven't seen that happen myself, but kind of scary a little bit, but no errors in medical medication, overprescribing, underprescribing, or misprescribing. Predictive modeling is big, both in the underwriting world and also in the claims world. So if you've got risk direction on how a claim is going to be going, you're not having your claims staff spend time determining that on their own, and allows claims people to focus on people. So more individualized attention to the injured worker. And definitely robotics, both in the manufacturing world, and we see this in unmanned cars. Mixing humans and robotics, however, creates another yet hazard that can occur. So that's something to look at. And if we're looking at predictions, here's some common safety and health predictors. You've got gas detection devices, things, alarms that can go off. We do health risk surveys. There are safety culture surveys, which are very important. Check the pulse of your own safety culture in your own organization periodically. Find out what they really think. Severity index, predictive analytics, we talked about in workers' comp. Underwriters using predictive modeling to price risks. Peer behavior and environmental observations. Again, that's kind of similar to the safety culture. Pre and new hire orientation and casualty prediction. Definitely weather related, earthquake related, that kind of thing is going on. So there's also some successful strategies and best practices just in general that I'd like to talk about. You've got recovery opportunities. We talked about the severity of driving incidents, of motor vehicle accidents, for example. That's probably a good selection of where subrogation comes into play. And if those of you that don't know what subrogation is, it's recovery. So your insurance company, you definitely want to report these incidents. Your insurance company takes over, they start paying the claim. But in the meantime, if somebody else is at fault, they have an opportunity to recoup that back to you in the form of subrogation. So you want to look at opportunities like that. Fraud and red flags, if we're talking about injured worker fraud, there definitely are some red flags out there, reporting injuries on Mondays, not supervised injuries, something happened, nobody saw it happen, things like that to be aware of. Loss control, we talked about doing a risk hazard in your own organization, walking through your organization. And then once an injury does occur, there are ways to reduce the cost. Reporting and investigation, we want to make sure that everybody knows the system. I think there's this big concern from an employer standpoint of, oh, we don't want to talk about workers' comp because we might get more accidents reported or injuries reported. Well, that may be a good thing to your credit, is make sure people do know that they need to report and investigate. What's your return to work policy? If somebody does get injured, we've already determined that if you can get somebody back to work, it lessens the cost of a claim, I think, in half. What's your medical provider relationship? Are you using occupational medicine doctors? Just sending them to the most local clinic, may not be the best advice. Most of your carriers have a medical provider network list that you can choose from, and these are doctors that are trained in occupational medicine, how the system works, how to get those reports back timely, all of that. Build a relationship with your claims team at your carrier, and your broker and agent can help forge that relationship. And eliminating the mystery of workers' comp, the frontline supervisors are probably the most important to train on. They should really know the whole process within your organization from reporting hazards, reporting injuries, what happens once they report the injury to the HR or whoever else is handling that with the claims staff at your insurance company, and reassuring your employees that their job is safe. You're not going to terminate them because they've reported an injury. Tell the injured employees about the reimbursement of mileage. That's kind of something that's left on the table a lot. If they have to drive to the doctor, that mileage is reimbursable by the work comp system. So they should know all aspects of their claim and how that whole thing works. Take the mystery out of it. Because if you don't, here you go. You've got an attorney that will definitely educate your injured worker as they sit home and watch television. There are plenty and plenty of advertisements for this stuff. If you minimize the attorney involvement, you can have more conversation and actively care for your injured worker. Once they do get an attorney, you virtually eliminate the possibility of communication with them. You can't really involve yourself in the claim as much. The attorney will have to take that role. So you want to get the care for them first, and do the paperwork later. Yeah, make sure, if you have to call 911 or you have to get them to the medical clinic, don't worry about the paperwork. You want to notify your claims team as quickly after that injury happens. And I know that a lot of you that are handling workers' comp cases say, well, it never got reported to me until a week after it happened, and supposedly. Well, number one, that's a red flag, one of those fraud red flag things. But number two, it really puts you behind the 8 ball in managing this claim, and your claims team, it puts them behind. Continue to practice actively caring steps. We don't want to forget, while we're involved in the process of filing all these forms and dealing with all of this, that this is a person. This is a person that not only are they losing work and they're concerned about their job, but it may impact them at home. Maybe they can't drive their spouse to work, or they can't take their kids to their sporting activities, etc. It's, an injury impacts them in many, many ways. But here's an example, the percentage of claims litigated relative to report lag. So between 0 and 10, up to over 30 days, you're almost guaranteed a higher probability of litigation. Once it gets longer and longer, and the injuries reported within 2 weeks of injury were 18% more expensive than those reported within 1 week. So as you go, the expense also goes up. So Intercorp did a study, and they studied a survey of employee perception of their workers' compensation claim experiences. And here's what they came up with. So your communication really counts, showing you care, treat people the way you would want to be treated, get help and medical care for your injured worker, get well cards, which is really cool, signed by your staff. Hey, we really miss you, goes a long way. Flowers or some other means of recognition, visits or calls. Visits may be out of the question at this point, but definitely, we're doing this telecommuting right now today. So definitely, if you have an opportunity of including them on a teleconference, where maybe they can even see their coworkers on, if you have that kind of capability. Demonstrate your understanding and caring behavior, and discuss job security. Sometimes you can't always guarantee that they're able to return depending on their medical conditions. And it will depend a lot on what the doctor has to say as far as their medical restrictions. But you definitely want to assure the injured worker. And the preferred source they found for information should be provided by employers, mostly the supervisors. Supervisors probably know the employee best. And if that information can come from them, that's the preferred source. So I think I've finished up rather quickly, but I think we covered the financial status of the industry, which looks very, very solid at this moment that I checked everything out. The OSHA updates and Cal OSHA updates for those of you in California. Kind of what the future looks like. Very technology oriented, as we discussed. And then some fine points of how to minimize the cost of your injuries once they do occur. Hopefully you can keep the attorneys at bay and handle that. So once again, happy St. Patrick's Day. And Deb, I'd like to open it up if there's any questions that happened along the way that we didn't answer, or anything I can do at this point.
Sure. So there have not been any questions that have come in yet, but I'm going to encourage any of you that do have questions to please put those in right now, and we will get to them here momentarily. I will take care of a bit of business here and let you know that a copy of this presentation will be available, and we will send out all of the information for how to get all of the information from this presentation today by logging into our website. There are some questions. What was that?
Was this also recorded? Was the recorded session available?
Yes, this is a recorded session as well. And I do have a couple of questions coming in now, Deborah. One of them is regarding the OSHA website. Are there industry-specific IIPPs available on the OSHA website? For example, maybe the restaurant industry?
Yes, actually, that was the newest one that they did provide in a Word format, is the IIPP for the restaurant industry. I think there's also for construction separately as well.
Okay.
There for a while, they weren't providing Word documents. I don't know why that was. Maybe a security website issue. But yeah, these are in Word format, which makes it very easy to help adopt them to your business. I would caution anybody, though, not to just take them at face value, just maybe look at them, make sure they fit for your particular business.
Right. And if somebody's not able to find a specific IIPP, can they contact you?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, great. And then I think that is all of the questions that came in. We do have one more polling question. Should I go ahead and launch that now?
Oh, hey, yeah, sorry, I missed that one.
That's okay. So what we'd like to know is, how would you rate today's webinar? So if you had at least one takeaway, then hopefully you would rate it pretty good. Some important points might rate it good, average or not so good. We hope that you feel a little bit better about it than that, but we'd love your honest feedback. And we are getting, we've had a few people drop off already. I think they thought the presentation was over. So Deborah, I will share these statistics with you after everyone leaves today. Let me say, while everybody is continuing to answer that we thank you for attending today's webinar presented by Heffernan. We will send information by email with instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. And thank you, Deborah Parker, for your time and expertise today. We hope all of the attendees found today's webinar to be a valuable use of your time, and be sure to join us on April 7th for Conducting Effective Workplace Investigations. Thank you, everyone, and have a safe day.